has to do some fun like little B-field magic going on there. It actually stabilizes it. That's literally what they do with this in the older power cords. Is they just put like a ring magnet, costs about like 30 cents, and you get for $1 or so. It's not that expensive.
I can't see you again. Sorry, that something must be wrong with my Twitter. I can't find you again, Tyler.
Okay. I'm
Hey,
okay with
BB.
that. Alrighty. So we're
Tyler, can you see
streaming.
me in Twitter space?
I already invited you to co-host the Twitter space. There we go. Okay. So Cheryl's a co-host now. BB's in the house. Professor Ossoff's in the house. We're just at 100 in Clubhouse. Let's go ahead and get it started in usual fashion by open invitation for anyone to share a hot story that they want to make sure we get into before we dive into the quote-unquote top stories.
Have we covered Jedi Blue recently?
No. What's that?
Okay.
What is that, Chris?
Jedi Blue is one of the larger scandals going on at the moment. Let's see. It is here. I'll send you a back channel link. This is the one that essentially has the state attorney generals and however many states going, hey, looks like some antitrust is going on here. Essentially, Google and Facebook have a data sharing agreement that has apparently broken some antitrust laws and also siphoned some customer data around. So, yeah, there's apparently the big thing about it was, I'm just reading through the thing right here. Jedi Blue case exposed by the Wall Street Journal, followed up by the New York Times. It was originally back in October that they basically broke the original thing, but there's a lot of stuff that came out last week. It's basically a quid pro quo scheme that starts with Google's 2007 acquisition of DoubleClick, ends with Facebook in 2018, agreeing not to challenge Google's advertising business in return for very special treatment at Google's ad auctions. Anyways, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here about like the real-time bidding systems and stuff, but Jedi Blue we'll probably be hearing about more in the future because it's the wheels of government are turning right now, so it's an interesting thing to watch.
Okay. Thank you for that one. Anyone else burning? I know Ken usually likes to share articles.
I sent a link in the back channel.
Okay, thank you. Alrighty. No one else with a real hot one they want to make sure we get into. Going once. You know the sound that comes next. Going twice.
Just to say, we are in the UK. We're gone to 5 days, just like the US now. That's it.
5 days of what?
Sorry, 5 days of, if you're COVID positive, if you're negative on the 5th day, or you just need to check for 5th day and 6th day. If you're negative, you can walk about. You don't have to isolate. Before we had to isolate for 7 days, and before that it was 10 days.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So that's
Meanwhile, in China,
opening
they
up the
shut down
economy.
the entire city if a single person tests negative. So it's a bit different how people are handling this.
Talking about COVID, Novak Djokovic left the Australian Open.
Yep.
Yeah, deported.
Alrighty.
I was
think
being a
not
little
just
bit
that.
nicer.
I think the French government is saying that if he don't get vaccinated, he will miss the French Open too. That's
Well, I
bad.
think he's gonna have a lot of problems going forward, right? Even here in the U.S., for non-citizens, there is, I think, mandatory that you have to be vaccinated. It really is very strict if you look at into non-citizens getting into the U.S. who are not vaccinated. It's very, very tight, even tighter than the Australian. So, I don't know what he's gonna do with all those opens. I guess he's gonna have to think about harder.
Become American.
Okay, so we're gonna go through the.
And I had some news that's a bit more long-term from EU and Denmark, Tyler.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is Susie Bianco from Denmark talking. I'm in the healthcare and innovation space, and there's been a recent report from Deloitte talking about interviewing healthcare workers in Europe about what is the barriers for digital transformation in shaping the future of European healthcare. And the report shows that I'm very proud to say that Denmark is a country that is most ready for the digital transformation. And the barriers are not unexpected to tech news around the world. Two ways. That is that the healthcare professionals say they don't know where to find the latest and best technologies. And secondly, that 58% of them say that the administration and barriers in the ways that the system is set up is the main reason for the digitalization and adoption of technology is not happening. So lack of access to new technologies, they don't know where to find quality technologies, and the barriers inside the system. So that's quite interesting for everybody working in that space.
It's a good
Thank
thing
you.
that Deloitte sells some services to help with these things.
Oh, yes, it is, isn't it? That's why I immediately said what the source is for the analytics, but it's rated as high quality also by the Danish legal structures or health structures. Susie from Denmark, thank you.
Thank you, Susie. So here we go. Last call. We're going to jump through the top headlines. Here we go. Happy Monday, January 17th. The top story today is that Safari 15, which is the most recent version of Apple's default native browser, Safari 15, has a bug that can leak your recent browsing activity, meaning all of that crazy porn stuff you've been viewing is being leaked.
What? The privacy-centric company is making a browser that basically hasn't been updated in forever? And has a vulnerability? No.
It's leaking your browser activity and your personal identifiers both. So not only is it leaking your crazy fetishes from the porn sites you visit, but also your identity right along with it. So everyone knows exactly who has that crazy foot fetish. So
It's pretty crazy that Apple takes was it 15 billion, I think it was, from Google to set the default search engine to go to Google, and it's very convenient how Apple's never quite upgraded Safari to support ad blocker extensions. It's amazing how this stuff works.
Mm-hmm. So there it is. That's your top story, and of course, there's a whole bunch of people tweeting about that, but it's pretty much simple on the face of it. Notably, not talking about it is Apple. So we have to wait to get Apple's official response on that. No doubt they are in a meeting as we speak, crafting that very carefully. The next story is from Microsoft. Microsoft identifies a destructive malware operation targeting Ukrainian organizations. The malware looks like ransomware but lacks a ransom recovery mechanism. So it says in the article, Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center, MSTIC, has identified evidence of a destructive malware operation targeting multiple organizations in Ukraine. This malware first appeared on victim systems in Ukraine on January 13th, so just around Thursday. Microsoft is aware of the ongoing geopolitical events in Ukraine. So apparently they've been using the internet over there at Microsoft, and just like everybody else, they're aware of the ongoing geopolitical events and the surrounding region, and encourages organizations to use the information in this post to proactively protect from any malicious activity. Because
the last time NotPetya from Ukraine happened, that caused havoc with global supply chains with Maersk being hit as a side effect. So that thing spills over in the next week or two. You're going to see cyber attacks starting to go hell and high heaven everywhere else as well.
Yeah. Well, they're essentially, this is as predicted, conflicts henceforth will have a cyber digital component to them as a prelude, as I've said, that and this is why everything's becoming digitized. That means everything can be hackable. That means everything can be on the chessboard in terms of geopolitical tensions. And it's totally obvious that they're talking about Russia hacking Ukraine and causing headaches over there. And in fact, there was a tweet that I saw 12 hours ago from a Ukrainian official now claiming that they have absolute proof now that a lot of this cyber hacking going on in Ukraine is coming from Russia. And those of you who joined us when we met last time on Friday, you will remember a funny headline about how the Ukrainians the American intelligence agencies are warning the Ukrainians that Russia is going to hack them, and then Ukrainian agencies are saying, we are being hacked, but it's a little too early to presume who it is. Like, give me a break, like it's Norway or Canada or something. And then over the weekend, there was the official announcement that they actually have hard proof now, like there was any question. So that's what's going on. But the interesting thing, again, about this is that this is the new table stakes. This is now that all of our food, water, energy, and all critical supply chains and everything is digitized, and anything digitized can be hacked. That means we have a whole new dimension and a whole new set of moves and chess pieces on the chessboard with regard to political, drama.
Because when utility basically comes down to security and they have to choose, they'll basically take utility each time. And
Especially when there's
yeah,
possible deniability. So
why wouldn't you?
why wouldn't you? We could spend hundreds of millions on missiles and tanks, or we could, hire, Boris, the super hacker, and he's worth hundreds of millions in weaponry and the amount of kind of fear, uncertainty, and doubt and mayhem that he's able to cause. With which, by the way, the UN has not yet updated the Geneva Convention to include anything about cyber hacking. So it's all free go for now.
We should just go back to typewriters.
Hey, Tyler, Chris, two things to follow up. Dimitri, what's his name from CrowdStrike, spoke for Ingested 101, Politics and Media 101 yesterday, and his view is that between the Ukraine and Russia, they'll definitely still have a lot of on the ground and missiles and that kind of stuff would be the attack, and they still see a lot of that. I agree with you. Everything's cyber. We're in cyber war right now. And the other is David Sanger, who we had last week, who's the journalist in cyber, has a book and a documentary out. And I watched the documentary last night. And to Chris's earlier point, the stuff that that each of the governments is putting into each other's systems and defense and everything else bleeds out. And so he has some big examples of where that bleeds out. And Chris referenced the Maersk, taking down Maersk supply chain. Anyways, yeah, so that if people are interested in this stuff, that documentary gives a great overview and it's really interesting.
For folks that want to learn more about this, the term is Advanced Persistent Threats, or APT. You can find all sorts of fun little articles about that, but that's the chessboard that's being set up for the, hey, I'm not going to do anything with this now, but when I hit this big red button over here, I want to basically hit every single server that we pre-hacked ahead of time, and I'd like to disable the mining in this country, or turn off the power plants in this country, or all the financial systems in this one. It basically turns abstract ideas about saying, hey, we can do this theoretical exploit 0-day. It takes all the nitty gritty of that and turns it into a high level policy decision that you can make at a single point by a military commander or a government leader. And that's where it gets really interesting, is when that transition thing. So advanced persistent threats is where you can learn more.
So
So Tyler,
one
sorry.
second, Aaron. As regular tech newsers know, we do not pick the list of the top news. And the next one is a sister article to the previous one about Microsoft identifying destructive malware on Ukrainian organizations' systems. The next one's from the Financial Times. The headline says, Ukraine's government now says, quote, all evidence points to Russia being behind the attack, which took down about 70 government websites. Proof of involvement could meet threshold for West to impose sanctions, but incident yet to be formally attributed. It says Ukraine said it had evidence that a cyber attack against government websites on Friday was likely to have been carried out by Russia, amid fears that Moscow was planning military action after security talks with the U.S. and NATO failed. Quote, at the moment, we can say that all evidence points to Russia being behind the attack. Ukrainian Digital Transformation Ministry said in a statement on Sunday, quote, Moscow continues to wage hybrid war and is actively growing its information and cyberspace capabilities. Kiev said the investigation was ongoing and did not formally attribute the attack to Russia. Jake Sullivan, U.S. National Security Advisor, also stopped short of blaming Moscow on Sunday, but said, quote, it would not surprise me one bit if it ends up being attributed to Russia. Separately, Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council said over the weekend that it suspected a hacking group tied to Belarusian intelligence had perpetrated the attack, suggesting Russia could have used its ally to create plausible deniability of its own involvement. Oh, wow, my own magic phrase appeared in that paragraph, plausible deniability. That's the whole name of the game, is plausible deniability. So why not take it one step further and use your allies, or, by the way, not even allies, just have your own operatives operating out of Belarus and Moldova and, the Eastern Bloc, as I said they would do, as I have predicted they exactly would do. As regular tech newsers know, I said 5 months ago that's what would happen, is that the Russian-based hacking groups like DarkSide and what have you are evil, disappeared after Biden and Putin met in Geneva about 5 months ago during the summer. And I said, watch, what's going to happen is the Russian hacking outfits will disappear and there will be new magically appearing hacking outfits out of the Eastern Bloc. And what do you know, Joe, 2 weeks later, that's precisely what happened. So
it's like a rebranding effort.
Right. So this is because the stipulation that when Joe Biden met with Putin in Geneva, he said, if it's happening from your borders, you're responsible and we're going to hold you responsible. And if you attack our critical infrastructure, we will retaliate by attacking your natural gas pipelines to Europe and whatnot. And Putin said, okay, message received. And then, what do you know? Our evil shuts down, DarkSide shuts down, and these new hacking outfits show up out of Belarus right on time, right as some handsome white bald dude predicted here in Tech News. And now these hacks are coming out of Belarus. What a surprise. What a shock. Absolute shock. So, this obviously they want the protection of plausible deniability by having their operatives working outside of their own borders. Why would you not do that? So, Ukraine's Western allies have warned that cyber attacks could be a prelude to further military aggression after Moscow amassed 100,000 troops near the border in recent months. The cyber attack, which took down about 70 government websites, came as the White House warned Russia was positioning operatives in eastern Ukraine as part of a false flag operation to create a pretext for invasion. The US and EU have vowed to impose crippling sanctions against Russia on a far greater scale than after the annexation of Crimea if it renewed its aggression against Ukraine. Russia seized control of Ukrainian peninsula in 2014 and has since fomented a separatist war against Kiev's central government in the eastern Donbas region. Russia has denied it is planning to invade Ukraine, but warned of an unspecified military technical response if the U.S. does not meet Vladimir Putin's demands to roll back NATO's eastward expansion and pledge never to admit former Soviet countries, including Ukraine. Western officials have refused to give ground on the demands while attempting to reach a compromise on issues such as arms control and military deployments. You get the idea, blah, blah, blah.
I can chime in here if it's helpful.
Yeah,
I mean, look, the situation with the cyber hacking was a mixture of
well, that's a bit suspenseful.
Clubhouse just kicks me out when I start talking for some reason. But yeah, anyway, the cyber hacking was probably perpetrated by the Belarusians, used by a group which is known as UNC1151, which is essentially an ultra-nationalist group working under the pretext of the Belarusian sort of government, as it were. The Belarusians and the Russians have a very close political union, and Lukashenko just acts as sort of somewhat as a proxy to the Russians in many ways. So if we looked at if you guys remember the Polish-Belarusian border back in the fall, when there was a lot of issues, Lukashenko threatened to shut off energy to the European Union, and Putin actually had to sort of make a statement that no we won't be doing that. So there's a little bit of sometimes confliction between the two. In terms of Ukraine, I mean, this all comes down to Putin's desire to reincorporate what's known as Nova Russia. So, a lot of Putin's desire is to protect the Russian ethnic speakers, much like he did when he sent in the Collective Security Treaty Organization troops to Kazakhstan. That was to protect a quarter of the Kazakhstani population, which are Christian ethnic Russian speaking, and there was fear that there might be multi-ethnic violence. So Putin has this sort of, I think, desire not only to recreate sort of greater Russia, if you want, or the Russian Empire, but to also just protect Russians in other countries. It's the same in the Baltic states as well. And Nova Russia tends to be, it's primarily Donbass, but also it goes down south over towards Transnistria, which is a small area of Moldova. So there are some fears that he could start this campaign, if you want, and it will go all the way from eastern Ukraine south along towards Moldova to Transnistria, which is on the northern west side of the Black Sea. I don't think it would go to that extent, but there is definitely a potential for him to invade and occupy the eastern areas that the separatists have been occupying for much of the conflict in the past 8 years. The other thing I would say is that when he met with the West, I mean, it's important to remember there were 3 different meetings, each with their own agendas and groups. The Ukrainians were present at the NATO meetings, but not at the American, and they were also at the third meeting. But they went in knowing that their demands would be rejected. They demand that NATO withdraw all their troops from the east, and that all the East Bloc countries that joined are kicked out, which is not going to ever happen. So the Americans have tried to make some kind of concession proposals, namely they'll stop military exercises in the East. Every year, the Americans do military exercises along with NATO allies, particularly in Poland, but also to reintroduce discussions on missile deployment, namely perhaps rejoining the INF treaty, which is the intermediary missile treaty that was signed by Gorbachev and Reagan in 1987. That was considered to be a pretty landmark deal because most of the missiles are going to be INS and would be within striking distance of Moscow from wherever they're dotted around in Europe. So these are 2 proposals which I don't think the Russians have had much comments on. But it's clear that neither side are willing to make any movement on their expectations. I think that the US is not, well, the US isn't sending in troops. That's very clear. They have trained up the Ukrainian forces to a very decent level. The Ukrainian forces about 2,000, and they're hardly battened, but they're hard and ready to go, is what I'm trying to say. So it wouldn't be a cakewalk for the Russians, definitely not. And it's you're not going to see them going all the way to Kiev. That's out of the question. It's just a case of how far they go into Ukraine, and it's likely you'll see NATO providing some kind of defense initiatives, but it could turn into quite a messy guerrilla war. But I still remain skeptical as to whether or not we're actually going to see this happen. I just would have thought, it would happen by now. Why the big build up? Russia obviously doesn't really want to do it, otherwise it wouldn't even engage in the discussions in the first place. But anyway, I'll hand back to you. Thanks for letting me.
Quick little 20-second geopolitics. History of Russia can be defined in warm water ports, St. Petersburg, fun things with Crimea. A lot of what they want to do is get access to that and basically defend against it. The border that they have essentially on their west is very difficult to defend with Moscow. There are no natural mountain ranges or like large ocean bodies like most European groups have to work with. So they've relied heavily on buffer states to prevent essentially getting steamrolled. It's imperative that the physical distance they keep between Moscow and the rest of Europe is basically as large as possible, because that's their defendable terrain, essentially, is just the sheer breadth of it. The very last part is that if you want to learn more about the energy policy, about why is Europe importing so much oil from Russia if there's so much, hasty geopolitics and feistiness going on, You want to look at a region with Azerbaijan and Baku. There's a fun little history on that. It involves the Nobel family and all sorts of other things that don't get covered very much in our history books. But if you go research it, you can find out essentially why certain decision makers in certain families in certain key positions end up making the sorts of alliances they do, and why we're in the situation we're in right now. So yeah, fun stuff. We'll be seeing a lot more of that in the near future, with Ukraine becoming more of a hot button item, and will spill off in the cyber attacks into all the tech news around the world in the future. So fun times.
Speaking of fun stuff, the next article is from CNBC that recent filings from Walmart, including 7 U.S. trademark applications, indicate Walmart's possible plans to develop and offer virtual goods, NFTs, and, drumroll please, their own Walmart cryptocurrency. Walmart appears to be venturing into the metaverse with its plans to create its own cryptocurrency and collection of NFTs. And the question on everybody's mind is, how much will a triple XL tank top sell for in the metaverse? It's a wonderful question.
Especially with 30% inflation, making it the virtual item basically better than the real world one.
Walmart, the big box retailer, filed several new trademarks last month that indicate its intent to make and sell virtual goods. In a separate filing, the company said it would offer users a virtual currency as well as non-fungible tokens, or NFTs. Walmart appears to be venturing into the metaverse. The big box retailer filed several plans. According to the U.S. Patent Trademark Office, Walmart filed the applications on December 30th, in total 7 separate applications. In a statement, Walmart said it is, quote, continuously exploring how emerging technologies may shape future shopping experiences. It declined to comment on the specific trademark filing. Quote, we are testing new ideas all the time, the company said. Some ideas become products and services that make it to consumers, and some we test, iterate, and learn from. Yeah.
Hey, Tyler, back to Jeremiah's prediction, I think in November. Digital goods can also be delivered digitally, so they're immune to supply chain attacks.
Well, now we have a place to buy shotguns in the metaverse. So, the next one is from Mark Gurman from Bloomberg, that Apple's headset, AR or VR or MR or XR or whatever it ends up being, will likely cost more than $2,000 and have 2 CPUs, one on par with the M1 Pro. That's the new M1 processor in the new MacBook Pros. That's a rocking processor, by the way. 2 8K displays and an interchangeable prescription lens option. A Friday.
Oh, bullshit. HoloLens basically has had that market for forever, and the thing is, they couldn't make it work at a $2,000 price point. There's no way Apple can pull that off. If they can't hit $500, it's not going to work. The market's not large enough. You can look into the anything from the Gartner stuff, where you can basically just draw up the numbers on how many corporations can afford it. They can't hit that price point. It will not.
Tyler,
It will not work.
Tyler, the one thing about talking about Apple is they've got a long waiting list to get your Mac. It's like 6 to 8 weeks. If you customize your new processor, kind of thing, hard drive and stuff. So someone should dig into that, why that is, because I think you talked about it some time ago that it could be to do with, but I thought that it was their own chip. So why is it taking this long?
It's something that might be helpful for people. It's the prototyping process at Apple and other Microsoft and other large groups. When they're building any of these products, they will have at any time like 12 or 24 different versions of the product, and every single combination of here's a different screens, here's a different processor, here's a different price point, here's a different thing. And so whenever they bring in someone to say, look at our secret glasses prototype, that also is useful for them because they know who leaked what on which date and who got which demo. Because at any time there's a bunch of them. Which one they actually market with they actually send to the supply chains, which one they actually end up building and selling to the public, usually ends up being a very small, sub project of the larger research endeavor that goes into that. But this is one of the reasons we see so many leaks with wildly different specifications that leak into the press, because they're different products internally. Yeah, they're built out. Yeah, it works kind of. but which one we actually ship is going to be very, very different from the one that we're seeing or hearing leaks about.
Okay. Next up is a sister.
And there are different versions of the same thing usually. So depends on what's the release of that thing. You'll have different specifications.
I can tell you one thing: it's not going to be a $2,000 product. The market just isn't large enough.
Okay.
Well, it's 4,000. What cost me?
We're talking about a different device. We're talking about the price of the Apple headset that is not going to be out for many, many months.
Oh,
No,
okay,
it's the
sorry.
next quarter. Don't you hear, Tyler? That's what every news item ever says.
Well, the last time we saw a headline about this is that it would be not coming out at WWDC, which is normally in the spring. It would be coming out in the fall event, which is the annual second Tuesday in September, where Apple announces the new iPhone each year. Mark Gurman also has an article claiming he has sources that Apple will expand car key availability beyond BMW by this summer, starting with Hyundai's and a look at potential Apple headset names. So he's got some people dropping some hints about what they will call the name of the device. Eyeglass comes to mind, but I imagine the trademark might be gone on that one.
They should call it Vapor. That would be like really ironic if they actually launched a product with it.
So the next article is from Rolling Stone. It says the UK government hires an ad agency, MNC Saatchi, which is a huge ad agency, to run a publicity campaign criticizing Facebook's plans to make Messenger end-to-end encrypted by default. Oh boy, was I right or was I right? Did I not say that the end-to-end encryption is going to become the big battlefield between governments and big tech? And here it is. The UK government's
They'll just cut the end devices if they're not going to have the end process stuff. I mean, you can compromise at any point of the transaction.
The Home Office in the UK has hired a high-end ad agency to mobilize public opinion against encrypted communications. Oh, gee, I wonder why. With plans that include some shockingly manipulative tactics. Yeah, it's going to be because ultimately it might come down to what the people really want. It's going to be a battle between the governments who don't want end-to-end encrypted and the tech companies who ostensibly do. And the question is, what do the users want? Well, I'll tell you, the users want end-to-end encryption generally. And the government's going to try and convince you that you don't want it. And that's what the UK Home Office just did, is they're hiring one of the world's biggest PR agencies that are in the game of public sentiment manipulation, essentially, is the name of their game, to try and convince people that they don't want end-to-end encryption, ostensibly. So,
Tyler, end-to-end encryption is worthless and meaningless if the end devices are compromised at the factory via government mandates.
Fair point.
I mean, Clipper chip essentially is the old school version of this back in the 90s with Clinton or whatever. But it's weird because de facto we end up getting something very similar to that implemented. And when you talk about essentially these data sharing agreements between the larger the tech companies, when you look at the CLIA, the actual implementation of how the data centers and cloud storage actually works for the physical deployments of the data centers, de facto we have the similar situation, kind of like what the Bitcoin folks are running into, where it's like, that's great, you've got decentralized currency, it's encrypted, it's got all those crazy things. Yeah, you want to exchange that into money, we're going to regulate you with know your customer. Similar thing here. Yeah, you can send encrypted data back and forth, that's great. By the time you actually want to actually have the physical device actually be able to access that thing, yeah, you're going to have to put these chips on here. Would you like to talk to the radio towers or 5G? Because you got to have this decryption thing on there. And that's just being implemented without nearly as much debate.
Yeah, and the X factor is businesses, large and small, who really want end-to-end encryption to secure their trade secrets and customer data and everything else, and they're going to lobby hard for it.
I'm going to make a prediction that the public sentiment operation to try and push people against end-to-end encryption will involve the worst case scenario kind of messaging around child. What do we call it?
CSAM, I think, is the current politically acceptable term.
Yes, CSAM and child trafficking and that sort of stuff.
The
And
terrorists, the child pornographers,
they're going,
every basically
right.
nightmare boogeyman.
Well, they already did it in Australia, right? They have
Right.
backdoors,
But they're going to
policy of
try and
backdoors.
associate end-to-end encryption with child trafficking, essentially. So
The real question is whether or not they can pay more money than the groups that stand to benefit from those other PR firms, and then it's not what actually is the case is not going to get lost in the weeds because it's just going to be who pays which PR firm more money to say for or against, and then we're just going to pick from the news headlines and see which one sounds more favorable.
So here's the Rolling Stone article. I'm going to try and pin it to the top of the... Oh, somebody just pinned it. Thank you, Cheryl. Cheryl pinned it to the top of both Twitter Spaces and Clubhouse because we're in both apps simultaneously, and where we've got nearly 300 in Clubhouse and God knows how many in Twitter Spaces. And if you're a speaker on either stage, we can communicate and hear each other, and that's kind of the whole beautiful thing here. Anyway, so the article says that the UK government is set to launch a multi-pronged publicity attack on end-to-end encryption. Rolling Stone has learned one key objective: mobilizing public opinion against Facebook's decision to encrypt its Messenger app. Okay, now let's pause there, because make no mistake, that's just one of a dozen end-to-end very publicly popular apps that will involve end-to-end encryption, and they're starting with Facebook Messenger, but there's several more. The Home Office has hired Saatchi Advertising Agency, a spin-off of Saatchi & Saatchi, which made the Labour Isn't Working election posters among the most famous in UK political history, to plan the campaign using public funds. According to documents reviewed by Rolling Stone, one of the activities considered as part of the publicity offensive is a striking stunt: placing an adult and a child in a glass box, with the adult looking knowingly at the child as the glass fades to black. Multiple sources confirmed the campaign was due to start this month, with privacy groups already planning a counter-campaign. Quote, "We have engaged Saatchi to bring together the many organizations who share our concerns about the impact of end-to-end encryption would have on our ability to keep our children safe," a Home Office spokesperson said in a statement. Well, Jesus Christ, I'm known to make good predictions, but they don't normally come to fruition in less than 3 minutes. Yeah, that's what they would do, and that's what they just did. Successive Home Secretaries of different political parties have taken strong anti-encryption stances, claiming the technology, which is essential for online privacy and security, will diminish the effectiveness of UK bulk surveillance capabilities, make fighting organized crime more difficult, and hamper the ability to stop terror attacks. And shame on me, because that was my second thought about what they will, they'll claim, you can have a choice. You can have end-to-end encryption, or you can stop terrorism, but you can't really have both. But
just quick about historical context. The red line, if you want to look that up, is really important to Britain's history. Basically, they pioneered a lot of the technologies behind the telegraph and the ability to actually lay the submarine cables. A lot of the technologies around early 1900s, late 1800s were actually pioneered by Britain. They had a cable called the Red Line that basically connected all of their empire, the entire world essentially, all to London. And one of the key parts about that is they also allowed other countries to basically use the line for their communications. Incidentally, around this time frame, they got really, really, really good at espionage around a lot of these things. In the 1950s, when essentially America ended up inheriting a lot of the empire in return for saving, Britain's ass during World War II, that's a little more complicated than that. I'm vastly oversimplifying. We inherited a lot of the surveillance infrastructure along with that. When Britain is saying they don't have end-to-end encryption, there is a very strong historical reason for why that goes against Britain's geopolitical interest. It's not coming out of nowhere now. It has a very long track record there. So it's fun if you get the background on it. It makes it a little more sense for the present day.
Okay, so the next one is, what do we got here? Where are we at, Cheryl? The next one is Amazon reverses its proposed ban on Visa credit cards in the UK. Due to start on January 19th, the company had cited high transaction costs as the reason that they want to ban Visa. Amazon has emailed UK customers to say that a planned ban on Visa cards will no longer take place. Next up, a French startup called Exotec, which builds autonomous industrial warehouse robots, raises $335 million.
That's because they actually have a physical product to ship for actual places that actually pay money, which is something that venture capitalists are very strange whenever they see something. It's like, wait, you actually make money?
Led by Goldman Sachs at a $2 billion valuation. French robotic company used some of the world's biggest retailers and enterprises, has raised $335 million. That's what we call a very large round. That's a lot of cake to spend on autonomous factory robots, which, make no mistake, this, not slowly, is the future we are building. With this $335 million of fundraising, this company is going to automate the factories, like the Amazon factories. And for those who forgot, there is a lot of Amazon factories contemplating unionizing, which Amazon's not going to really take lying down. And here come the robots right on time. And there was a really interesting move around September when a Amazon warehouse was voting to unionize, and Amazon invited a bunch of journalists who covered that story of the Amazon factory that was voting to unionize. Those journalists were invited up to Seattle to the global Amazon HQ to have a preview tour of the newest, shiniest Amazon warehouse of the future. And they arrived and were escorted in and given the tour. And there was one very notable change to this new warehouse, which was it didn't have people in it. And Amazon, by the way, this is a very unusual move for Amazon to be so outwardly kind of friendly to journalists in outreaching in this way. So this is what's happening. The factories are being, there's these people have figured out there was a real challenge. It was not obvious how to replace the humans in the factories. That opportunity is so huge, as you can see by the amount of this fundraise, that there's a huge financial incentive to figure out how to build robots that can replace the humans in all of these factories, because of the unionization of the cost of labor is going up very high. These robots work 24/7, 365 with no health insurance. You get the idea. And they work way faster. So you have the factories being automated quickly, not slowly. You have the delivery from the factory to the city being done autonomously by autonomous trucks. You have the dispatch location on the outside of your town being automated. And then you have the delivery from there to your door being automated. So the whole process is being automated, not slowly, rather quickly. VC investors, tech investors, are backing up the truck, as we say, on those companies to digitize, to autonomize that entire process. And when you remove all of the humans from that equation, you get massive deflation in the cost of these goods. So get ready for a future. You think some consumer goods were cheap now. Wait until they automate all. And by the way, the dark kitchens play exactly. The food falls under the exact same thing. The dark kitchens are being automated, and the delivery of that stuff is being automated, all in the next few years. So hold on tight. It's going to be a bumpy ride, because now you're talking about huge numbers of people will be replaced by robots, and it becomes this exacerbating force where the more jobs that get replaced, the more social unrest is kind of provoked. So
And who will
yeah.
buy all the Amazon stuff? Because I think people that have money and give a value to whatever they eat and dress don't buy everything on Amazon. So they're cutting off basically the hand that feeds them. Because if I have a choice, I go here in Williamsburg to a small store and buy organic stuff. And if I have a choice, I go to a designer that's locally, maybe even in Soho. There's like stores where you get stuff that nobody else is wearing because it's starting designers, and buy my clothes there. So I don't understand what the long-term plan is here.
Real quick on a technical level, this is a related technology called essentially for automatic storage and retrieval, or ASAR systems. This is kind of a weird combination they've got here with Exotec that's also combining with another technology called AGV, or automated guided vehicles. One of the reasons these are very valuable for factories is they basically replace conveyor belts and give increased flexibility to reconfigure the manufacturing line. A lot of the automotive companies that are investing fortunes into upgrading their manufacturing technologies right now for electric vehicles are almost exclusively tooling on automatic guided vehicles as their main robotics technology for reconfiguring their factory. What's kind of cool about the version they have here with the automatic storage and retrieval robots, this is more like the style they have at the lights out factories that they have. They call them that because they can just turn off the lights and theoretically it's 100% automated. This is a combination version where the robots can actually pick from the actual pick and place, basically at a very large scale, but also basically go down the ground and actually retrieve at the very bottom part, which is a very, very cool combination. You're going to see more of these in the near future, as Tyler's alluding to. One thing to consider is that the robotics sector, when people think of robotics, they think about the moving arms and stuff like that, or the androids. The actual physically just move a vehicle from point A to point B in a factory is actually the much larger side of revenue. I think it's like 80% or something ridiculous like that. The last time I checked 2 or 3 years ago. One of the reasons it's very relevant is that a lot of the ideas about what can be automated and what can't be automated are based around ideas that are more depicted by science fiction or Hollywood movies. When you want to look at what's actually disruptive, physically moving something from one side of the factory to the other historically has been where the largest amount of risk reward mechanisms have kicked in. So, anyways, just some reference there. One last point is saying what do we do about the social disruption? There's a limited amount that you can do as a consumer. If your local group is paying taxes and Amazon isn't, then they're already working with like a 20-30% thing tied behind their back. It takes essentially not just you making a decision, but everyone in your community, state, etc., to basically have a impact at scale. If you want to make this something that doesn't have social disruption, it's actually quite simple. Just don't have Bezos own everything. If that robot is owned by, let's say, shares that are distributed to, I don't know, essentially each neighborhood in a community, and they all have a 30% stake collectively. That's pretty easy to ameliorate the social disruption. I feel like a lot of the social disruption language and rhetoric is kind of a prep thing, where preparing people for the idea that you have singular owners for everything, which is not the way it has to go. That's just the way our current tax code's set up. But that can be changed. It's not that hard, and it has happened many times historically. Anyways, fun stuff.
So the last tax change actually happened in 1986, a fundamental tax rewrite. And that would be a fundamental tax rewrite to force somehow get taxes to offset the cost or the job disruption of automation. So just a couple of quick things. This is just super. This one is just minor, but it is for anybody in economics. Prices aren't deflating, right? They're just reducing to the point that the market actually agrees that that is a low enough price for them because, employers or not employers, businesses would like to maintain those high prices with reduced costs, but market prices will come down competitively with one another until they reach a level that the market is satisfied. The other thing is, while there's a huge argument all the time that technology always creates more opportunities, that's never in the generation that exists with that disruption, right? There's always a generation of people that are essentially out of work and unable to reintegrate into the system. So this is something that is sort of, it's an easy thing to say for people that it's going to be fine. It'll always create more opportunities. Not if you're the buggy whip, maker. Not if you're the person who's working in the warehouse. For their kids and grandkids, sure. But this is a huge hardship that happens in the current generation. And this kind of thing should actually, I mean, I agree with the fact that it should actually be figured into some sort of distribution, like taxation, but there should be some sort of social economic distribution accounting for disruptive technologies because they're coming so fast now. It's impossible for the economy to absorb all the people that are being lost. And for new people to come up, you're basically pulling from the same group of people. So if you look at the labor statistics where it says, "Oh, it's a really tight market," it's not actually. There's a lot of people looking for work, and there's a lot of people looking to hire. But the people who want to hire at a rate that the people who want to work accept are not looking for those people. There's a fundamental mismatch, and this happens every time there's technologic disruption, along with something like a pandemic doesn't help, right? But anytime there's technologic disruption, you have a group of people who are all hunting for work, but they are not the group of people that the employers are looking for, right? The people the employers are looking for is a much, much smaller subset that they're all competing for. So it looks like a really tight market for the people who are in that group. And those are the people who largely are the ones that are reporting on this. So just keep in mind that real-time events don't match happy futures. That's just not the way people are living. So we have to account for those.
And this is when it go along with what Andrea was saying. In Lakeland, Florida, there are a lot of warehouses being built, but the employment is not where people think it would be because most of the labor is going to be done by robotics. And there is a standard called Industry Standard 4.0 and 5.0 that actually teaches next generation students about how to work with robots. And they are more facilitators to the robots as opposed to being employees. So we next generation technology is really influencing, as she was saying, about employment. So you have communities that are expecting to be employed, but with the use of robots, their expectations are lowered because they may not have the technical skills or the skills available that the robots and computers can use themselves, as opposed to hiring employees. And if they are hired, they are part-time workers, not full-time workers.
Okay, I need to reboot my computer, so I'm logging into my uh, other device here. Let's see if this works the way I hope it does. Okay.